What I wanted to do is, I think Lynn is a very interesting case study of the true local impact of our failure to get control of this influx of people from Central America, which started really a couple of years ago, as evidenced by the statistics that Mayor Kennedy gave us just from her community. So what I wanted to do is kind of I guess, blow up the information for a sense of how the surge is collectively affecting the nation and the sum total of all of our communities, and also talk about one particular aspect, one particular unintended consequence that is likely to occur as a result of this new influx of illegal arrivals from Central America. And we had some packets of information that I'm going to refer to throughout my presentation that I hope people had a chance to pick up. And if not, I think there'll be some on the table outside the room that give you a reference for some of the numbers that I'm going to mention and some that I probably won't have a chance to mention. But there has not been a lot of detailed information released by the Department of Homeland Security about the true size of the influx that we're experiencing. What they have told the public is that as of July 31st of this year, in this fiscal year, about 63,000 unaccompanied alien children, and that is illegal migrants who are younger than 18 years old and not accompanied by a parent. They are accompanied usually by a smuggler or by friends or family members. About 63,000 have turned themselves into the Border Patrol. Most of those encounters occurring in the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas. We are also told that in this fiscal year, as of July 31st, about the same number, almost 63,000, family units have presented themselves to the Border Patrol and been taken into custody. DHS either does not track or just doesn't want to say exactly how many people that number represents in the family units, but obviously it's at least 2 people, probably more in many cases. So at least 2/3 of this surge is made up of family units coming to the United States. This is not just about the children or the teenagers. We do know that more than 200,000 individuals who are not from Mexico have been apprehended at the border. So that gives us an estimate of how many people this has turned out to be. It's got to be in the neighborhood of 200,000 people just this year, not counting last year. And more are projected for next year. According to Border Patrol documents, they're expecting more than 140,000 UACs, unaccompanied juveniles, to be apprehended in the next fiscal year, and probably a comparably larger number of family units as well. Now, the locations of the resettlement, again, there's been no information released on where the family units have been allowed to resettle. Most of them were released from custody before the department started detaining them. And the reason for that was, were multiple, but one of them was that ICE didn't have a detention facility that was appropriate for these people. Despite the existence of a mass migration plan in which they knew how they wanted to and could stand up a detention facility for a situation such as this, ICE, either forgot about the plan or tossed the plan or whatever, for whatever reason is not using the plan. It closed its family detention center in Texas a couple of years before this got out of hand. So what ICE ended up doing is releasing most of the family members, some of them getting parole status. They have released information on where the unaccompanied juveniles have been resettled so far, which I've put in the packet. A total of 37,000 of them they've provided details on, with the majority going to a handful of states, which are a little bit different than the usual patterns of illegal settlement here. Over 5,000 in Texas, 4,000 in New York, about 4,000 in California, almost the same number in Florida as in California, and also significant populations of almost 3,000 in Virginia and Maryland. And what they're doing is that people are going to places where there are already existing established communities of Central Americans who arrived before them. The numbers, I'm sure, are going to increase next year, and the reason is that no one is being sent home, and so our country has yet to establish an effective deterrent for more people to come here illegally through South Texas. According to news reports, there have been roughly 280 of those 200,000 new arrivals who have been deported from the country. And that's about 280 people associated with, as a family unit, who were deported from the center in Artesia. That's a minuscule drop in the bucket for compared to the size of the influx. The main cost, as Mayor Kennedy indicated, to communities that are absorbing these individuals is education. And to give a sense of the sum total of what this cost is going to be, I took a look at what some of the states that are most affected have estimated for the costs of providing an education to all of the kids who have arrived in this influx. Texas estimates that it is going to be spending about $9,500 per child. And that's a figure that was developed for their budgeting process in the legislature. Florida has estimated that its average cost for educating a child is about $8,900 a child per year, but that these unaccompanied juveniles require an investment of an additional $1,900 per child. So, and the national average, and both of those states, by the way, seem to be running a little bit less per child cost than the national average, which is more like $11,000 to $12,000 per child. So if you apply those costs to just the number of unaccompanied juveniles who've arrived just this year, which is expected to be 90,000, that works out to about $1 billion per year, just for the ones that arrived this year, not counting previous arrivals, not counting future arrivals. It's an enormous sum of money that American taxpayers are going to be putting out to cover the costs of education. And again, we don't know how many kids are in the family units. It's got to be at least 60,000, assuming one child, one parent. And it's almost certainly much more than that. Another relatively undiscussed impact of this surge is going to be on the labor markets in our communities. How many of these individuals are going to be working, and where, and what kind of jobs? We know that some of the kids in Lynn are working, particularly in the landscaping industry, as I understand. And I think it's reasonable to assume that that's one of the primary motivating factors for them to come here, is that they will be able to work, whether legally or illegally. What many people don't realize is the family units who were admitted before they started detaining some of them, because they were released as parolees into the United States, are eligible to apply for a work permit. And many of them certainly will be granted work permits while they're here. Work permits have really become the primary vehicle for executive amnesty. The executive branch has the authority, without restrictions from Congress, on issuing work permits. They can issue an unlimited number of them. And, it has become apparent that when the president can't issue more work visas, he turns to the work permit as an option for providing people with the ability to stay here and support themselves. But finally, the worst unintended consequence of our failure to control this influx is the public safety consequences that are going to be a result of this. The most affected state has already quantified this, and that's Texas. They've already budgeted $300 million for this year, which they had anticipated because they've seen this surge happening over the last couple of years. They've had to add on an additional $17 million a month in state funds for public safety, primarily to back up the Border Patrol, because many Border Patrol agents are taken off the line in order to manage the custody of the families and juveniles who are crossing. But beyond the immediate expense of trying to contain the surge and limit the ability of criminal enterprises that are exploiting this weakly controlled border in Texas, there's another very serious but again predictable potential unintended consequence, and that is the resurgence of violent criminal street gang activity that is almost certain to result from this new influx of illegal immigrants. And I know the mayor referred to a decline in the number of gang members in Lynn. I think it's a pretty safe prediction that Lynn and other cities like it that have been absorbing a lot of this influx are going to see an increase in street gang activity. We know this from experience, but we also know it because of changes in ICE policy that have affected their ability to do gang suppression and dismantling efforts. And it's predictable because it's happened before. One of the unintended consequences of a previous wave of illegal immigration from Central America, which occurred in the 80s and 90s, was the emergence of a new breed of extremely vicious and unusually degenerate street gangs, and the most notorious of which was MS-13, but also included others like 18th Street and other gangs. MS-13 was founded by violent thugs who settled illegally decades ago in California at a time when gangs were not a major focus for law enforcement, and they were able to expand across the nation into areas that already had large illegal Salvadoran populations. A large share of the membership and leadership of MS-13 and 18th Street and certain other gangs is comprised of illegal aliens. That made them before and makes them today vulnerable to immigration enforcement in a way that they were not so vulnerable to local law enforcement or even to the FBI. And as a result of targeted immigration enforcement activity starting in about 2005 and continuing until just a couple years ago, through a program that ICE ran known as Operation Community Shield, these gangs were depleted and weakened throughout the country. It was a huge success. The ICE made more than 30,000 arrests of gang members across the United States, and a significant share are from the 3 Central American countries of the surge. And I've given you some statistics on those arrests nationwide in the countries of origin. We also find that a disproportionate share of the most violent street gang members and leaders and associates who are arrested do come from the Central American countries, and particularly from MS-13 and 18th Street. The success in ICE's program was possible because of the aggressive use of immigration enforcement authorities. They were arrested sometimes just because they were here illegally. I know that sounds like a quaint, antiquated concept now for ICE to arrest someone just because they're here illegally, but they were targeted because of their known affiliation with a criminal street gang, and mostly due to their involvement in crime and even minor crime. ICE got them off the street and prevented a lot of crime as a result, and this enabled ICE to successfully penetrate many of the more organized and larger street gangs. Now, the Central American gangs have evolved in many ways over the years. They're now less flamboyant, less public, better organized, more professional. They have a lot more money, they have a lot better equipment, and that makes them even more dangerous and harder to suppress and control. And as a result, they're even more of a threat to public order now than was the case 10 years ago. Many of them were deported to their home country and were able to continue and expand criminal activity there. They've recruited a lot of new members, often through intimidation. Gang crime, and especially violence, is, as we know, pervasive in the 3 Central American countries that are the source of the surge, where they operate with near impunity there. But in recent months, they've had the opportunity to take advantage of the chaos at the border to return. And in fact, many of them are involved with the smuggling organizations, either doing the smuggling or providing security for the smugglers or discipline, enforcement, whatever. But one thing has changed. ICE is now less able to address that public safety threat posed by these gangs because of changes in immigration policies. Agents are restricted in who they can arrest. They have to wait before an individual is convicted of a serious crime before they can keep them in custody and process them for deportation. Family ties that a gang member has can trump criminal affiliations or a potential threat to the public, even crimes that they've already committed. Some of these gang members now have quasi-legal status, either through DACA or their status as having come here as an unaccompanied juvenile. And DHS has, frankly, inadequate screening to prevent the embedding of gang members here and enabling them to get status. And ICE policies often lead to the release of gang members who have been taken into custody, arrested, and charged by some of ICE's investigative agents. One branch of ICE is arresting them, another branch of ICE is releasing them back into the community. And gang suppression, just frankly, isn't the priority that it was in years past for ICE. All of this leads me to have grave concerns about the potential for an increase in violence and crime due to street gang activity in those areas absorbing the surge.